What if your biggest growth opportunity isn't more customers, but better retention? Today's guest is helping companies around the world turn post-sale moments into long-term revenue. On this episode of the Pauline Chilton Show, I'm joined by Alex Booth, founder of Huckleberry Consulting and GetCSM. With nearly a decade of experience at industry giants like Microsoft and Amazon, Alex brings a wealth of insight into customer success, business growth, and building strategies that actually move the bottom line. At Huckleberry Consulting, Alex helps businesses boost retention and maximize post-sale revenue by turning complex data into clear, actionable strategies. And through GetCSM, he's helping organizations around the world recruit and train top-tier customer success managers to lead those efforts. Now based in Mexico, Alex is building his next chapter while balancing global businesses with a life of adventure. This conversation is a must listen if you're into software as a service, sales, customer experience, or just looking to build stronger, longer lasting relationships with the people you serve. Hi, Alex. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Hey, thanks for having me. I love the intro, by the way. You have a really great podcast voice. So, I really liked it.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, Alex, let's jump right in.
Let's do it.
You've built not one, but two businesses around customer success. What was the aha moment or experience that made you realize this is what I'm meant to do?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I feel like it was a combination of, tiny moments. I actually went to school for advertising. So I thought I was going to do advertising. And 10 years later, through my time at Microsoft and Amazon, I only did customer success roles. And I wanted to live abroad. I ended up going to Mexico, and I always wanted to start my own company. But when Amazon started making people return the office, I looked back at my skills thinking, if I'm going to start a business, if I'm going to live abroad, what are my skill sets? And it was 10 years of customer success. So that played a huge, influence. But I think beyond that, it's a position that you're kind of in a good position to sleep well at night, right? You're an advocate for the customer. Internally, you're making them more revenue through the good parts of providing value to customers instead of just taking money. So I think it kind of felt like I'm on a career path of something that has a purpose. And then, like I mentioned, it was the, 10 years of experience looking back.
And for someone who's never worked with a customer success manager before, how would you explain what they actually do? And how is that role different from a support rep or an account manager?
Yeah, I get this question a lot. So I think the easiest way to look at it is customer success managers are more proactive, right? So support is going to talk to a customer when there's an issue, or maybe there's an announcement that needs to be made. But a customer success manager is going to be reaching out to them about achieving their goals, asking them how, a campaign went, or maybe it's a plumbing company, asking how did that job go? Is there anything we could have done differently? Collecting that feedback, right? And then taking that internally and trying to address it. Figure out, okay, this person said we did a great job here, but we could improve over here. So then, going to those teams that can actually make those changes, all with the effort of trying to improve customer satisfaction, keep your customers longer, and then grow their accounts or get referrals from them. So I think it's just, in a nutshell, it's far more proactive, and it works with all different departments, whereas a customer service or support is going to be kind of your lifeline that you reach out to when you really need help, right?
Right. And I loved something you said to me earlier when we were chatting. You called a great customer support manager the glue between departments. Can you walk us through a time when a CSM made a real impact, maybe even turned a tough situation around?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a very common theme. I think customer success will fix a lot of maybe expectations that sales sets during, the sales process. And then a customer, comes on, they're onboarded, and then, oh my gosh, this is not at all what I was told, right? But I think a really great example of that would be There's a company called Proximity Outsourcing that I work with periodically, and they have customer success manager team. And they didn't have this before. We put them in place, and they had a really bad retention because, sales was definitely promising the right things, but there was no one there to make sure that it was being communicated correctly. Like they actually saw the value, right? Someone was there to ensure they were receiving the proper support that they paid for with maybe, an outsourced virtual assistant or program manager. So the customer success manager would, hold their hand through that process, check in. And if there's an issue that they're seeing, they take that as an opportunity to go and tell sales, these are maybe the realistic expectations that we can provide, but then also like training the individual that's been outsourced. So maybe that's the training team they would go to, and then they would make sure that they're addressing those issues proactively so the churn doesn't happen. I'd say majority of the time, I love you sales. I'm so sorry for saying this, but there's usually a disconnect between sales and then the product team of like what's actually happening.
That makes sense. And from your perspective, what are some of the most common ways companies drop the ball after the sale? And what's the real cost of that? Like, not just financially, but in relationships or growth?
Yeah, I think the most common way would be kind of overselling what solution or what problems they can solve for the customers that are coming in, right? Sales is always about solving a problem, right? You just want to solve a problem for a customer, and that's how you gain a customer. And maybe a customer is not a right fit for a product or service, but they really want to get them, right? They really want that sale. So maybe they over anticipate like what their company can provide. And I don't think that's necessarily all sales fault. Maybe there's a lack of communication where, a customer success manager can size the expectations of what we can actually solve, right? So they can actually be going after the right person. But the impact is a lost customer potentially, asking for a refund. So a financial impact there beyond like the reoccurring revenue, but then also the reputation. Nowadays everyone goes online, and I mean, if it's a good experience, sometimes you get, someone coming and talking about your brand, but 100% if it's a bad experience, they're going to talk about your brand, right? So if someone spent money and they had a negative experience, the likelihood that they mention your brand and potentially harm your reputation is really high.
Okay, so let's nerd out a little bit.
Yeah.
When it comes to measuring customer success, what data points or tools do you love? What gets you excited to dig into those numbers?
Ooh, yeah. I coming from the Microsoft background, I definitely am a data nerd. I think the basics that most people start with is going to be something called Net Promoter Score. So if you ever heard someone say NPS, and that just means on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely are you, the customer, willing to promote our brands or our brand or service to a friend or colleague, right? So if you scored 7 or above, pretty likely to, promote us. If you scored, let's say, below that, you're less likely. So there's a score that's based off of that. And you can, if you find out someone is scoring high, you can immediately reach out to them for a testimonial, maybe let them know about an affiliate program you have so they can get compensated for referring a new customer. But then another really key one is going to be customer satisfaction score. So at the end of the day, you want to figure out, are my customers satisfied with the product or service we're provided? So just like NPS, it's on a scale of 1 to 10, and people just score, 1 being the lowest. How satisfied are you? Very dissatisfied would be 1, 10, extremely satisfied. And that gives you a gauge. Do I have someone working with that person 1-to-1? And is their negative experience tied to that person? It gives you an opportunity to look at the data and then focus on, where there's an issue and figure out where the problem is. Sometimes it's hard to dig into all of your clients without any metrics to kind of pinpoint you where the issue is or where you should look. So those two are really key. But I think another huge one is going to be like renewal rate. So, am I losing customers, right? And if I spend money on the back end to not lose customers, are they impacting my renewal rate? So is my renewal rate increasing and my churn rate decreasing? Or how about like annual reoccurring revenue? So your ARR, your annual reoccurring revenue, or ARR, is that increasing? So am I getting more reoccurring revenue throughout the year? But I think those are probably the key ones. A lot of SaaS companies will focus on feature usage. So for example, like if I'm a Facebook, is everyone using the marketplace, right? I want to make sure that people are not only, using Facebook, but they're using marketplace, they're using all of our other features. So maybe a customer success manager on their side would try to, figure out how to get people to adopt more of the features that they've come up with to solve problems for people. Because the more problems you can solve and the more usage that they have of your services, the more likely they are to stay and spend more money and solve their problems.
And that's great. So if you had, let's say you developed a platform and you wanted to see whether or not people were enjoying your platform or if it was really helpful to people, you would dig into the metrics and take a look at what people are using.
Yeah, I call it like looking under the hood, right? Looking under the hood of your car and figuring out, where could we improve? A lot of times companies are doing great, but that doesn't mean they don't want to be better, right? You can never be your absolute best, right? There's always room for improvement. But, a majority of the time, there's always an issue with the company, no matter how big or small. And, just ignoring it and just hoping it goes away, isn't how you retain customers, create a good experience. You're always trying to improve. At least, if you're investing in the back end and you believe you should improve the customer experience, you should be looking at metrics.
And you've hired and trained customer success managers all over the world. What are some of the qualities or behaviors you've seen in people who are truly great at this work?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think you're going to hear, if you look into my industry, people always talk about empathy, right? Someone who has a lot of empathy, who can relate to people, understand their issues. I believe that's a great one, but I think my biggest, I'd say 3 are ownership, right? Someone who exemplifies a lot of ownership. So they're not, maybe you have an issue with a product and they just take your issue and then they send it to another team, but they don't see it through, right? And then whatever comes out of that escalation they made, they just provide it back to you. I want someone who is going to fully understand your issue, know that it's their responsibility to go talk with the product team, figure out exactly what's wrong so they can learn, right, and communicate it back to you and figure out if the solution is great for you because they're your advocate, right? So like that level of ownership is huge. And if you ask someone like in an interview about an experience, you'll hear them, going back saying, I took this to this team and they gave it back. And usually that's an indicator for me they don't exemplify a high level of ownership versus someone who says, I looked at the issue, I met with these teams, I got advice, we figured out a solution, I brought it to the customer, we implemented here. Like that exemplifies a lot of ownership. I think the next one would be agency. So someone who, definitely has, it's kind of related to ownership, but who has a lot of ability to learn and be curious, dive into different things, can learn fast, right? But my most favorite and important one, I think, is someone who has a backbone. So who isn't afraid to say no, who can disagree with someone, but, commit to whatever direction comes out of that. But at least they said their 2 cents, right? I think that earns a lot of trust when someone isn't just a yes person. They don't just exemplify ownership, but they also have a backbone and willing to put their, opinions on the line instead of just taking whatever the customer, says as like the absolute.
Those are all great points. Thank you so much for sharing that. You split your time between Mexico and the Philippines, and you run global teams. How has that lifestyle shaped the way you lead and build your business?
Oh man, I can't believe I'm living this life sometimes. I'm from Idaho. I never thought I would be doing this. It's really shaped my kind of style. As remote is kind of enabling remote work and living a lifestyle business, or, incorporating a healthy lifestyle into maybe employment. That's kind of how I operate things. My employees, I really want them to be out there living their best life. I really want them to be, spending time with their family. Not that work, isn't important, but that they're far more productive. They're far more happy, and they're far more likely to stick around with your company and make a good impact if the balance of work and life is, very harmonious. So I think, maybe because I didn't expect to be living such an interesting life, I want everyone else to be doing it because I'm just blown away by, just even every time I land in the Philippines, it's just so cool that I get to do that, right?
That's awesome. You mentioned that your wife really encouraged you to take the leap into entrepreneurship. What's it been like building this vision together, and how has that support shaped your journey?
Yeah, she's definitely my rock. I was a corporate guy for a very long time. Even though I've always wanted to start a business, it's a really hard decision to leave, a very cushy job and start your very first business. But she's a successful entrepreneur. She's just a really great human. And I don't think she's ever had a job. She's just bet on herself her whole life. She's been the breadwinner for her family for, since she was I think like an early 20s. So she's a rock star, and she's introduced me to so many different people that have really made me not feel alone in the entrepreneur journey. She's also given me a ton of advice. It's not easy. Sometimes you feel like as an entrepreneur, you don't have someone to talk to. Mine is with me, every single night. She's my, best friend, my wife, my favorite person. So, having that besides me and her being so experienced in the world or in the entrepreneur world is a very big leg up, and something I realize I'm very lucky to have.
That is so good. And I feel that it's great to have a good partner.
Yeah.
Is there a particular customer win or moment in your work that stands out? Something that really reminded you, this is why I do what I do?
Yeah. Actually, I had one last week that is really top of mind and really heartwarming, actually. So I have a client who's in Vancouver. I'm going to just keep her name and, company out of it, but she owns an automation company. So she's setting up automations for different companies, but it's her first time being an entrepreneur as well. She comes from the corporate world as well. And she's been not able to kind of leave her house, right? She's been very hands-on and hasn't been able to let go of her business at all. And it's really long hours. So her health and just stress has just been off the charts. And, somehow we got in contact, and I was able to get her someone that she trusted to work with her existing clients, right? She immediately, like a week later texted me, Alex, I'm at a conference right now and I'm not worried at all. I'm having the best time of my life. I'm not having to look at emails. And that's kind of snowballed into last week. She even came to Mexico for the very first time. She joined this big conference with us. She was talking to so many people, and I just saw the light in her eyes, being able to, as a, solopreneur, step away from the day to day, take a breath, enjoy her hard work, and talk to other people that are in the same situation while her business is in very good hands. I thought that was just kind of a really great moment. It almost made me feel like I gifted someone, what I've experienced before, right? Of just being able to enjoy something different, right? And grow.
Right. You helped her get her time and freedom back. That's powerful.
Yeah, it was a little tears actually, because she's just so emotional about it, and it just felt really good.
That's great. For founders or teams who are still focused mostly on support or fighting fires, what would you say to them about making that shift toward a more customer-focused, long-term approach?
Yeah, I would say you will yield more revenue. You will retain more clients. You will grow faster. Think about how much money you're spending on advertising or acquiring new customers, and that price just goes up and up. And the reason you have to keep doing it is because there's maybe bleeding, or the ship is sinking on the other end. So you're bailing out water while, water is coming in. If you can keep those customers, they're going to be your biggest advocate. No one knows your business better than your customers and yourself. So if you can turn your customers into walking testimonials, I'd say investing on the back end is absolutely worth it. And if you're eyeing an exit at some point for your business, no one's going to come in and buy your company just because it has a strong advertising machine and you're losing customers. They want to see that you have a product and service that is sticky and people enjoy and they want, right? So I'd say don't be scared to, take your first step into investing into someone to work with your clients and provide them the best relationship possible. It allows you to sleep at night as well, morally, and also, taking some of the stress out of your mind. But you don't have to start all at once. I know it's scary to have, US salaries being so high, or if you're in Canada, even Canadian salaries are so high. There's great outsourcing opportunities out there, or you can just bring someone on part-time to get started, and then you can see the value. So I'd say, don't worry about the fear in terms of it's not revenue driving. It absolutely is, and you'll see it very fast.
Thank you so much, Alex, for being on the show today and sharing your expertise. You've been so great with the insights that you've shared. Please tell our listeners how they can connect with you.
Yeah, I'm pretty old school, so I keep my Facebook between family, but you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm just Alex Booth at Huckleberry. So that's my consulting firm. My website is consulthuckleberry.com. That's the consulting firm. And then I have another one that is GetCSM.com, where you can either, hire us to find you the best customer success manager, either, in your local country or out of it.
And that's a wrap on today's conversation with Alex Booth. If you want to dive deeper into his work, head over to GetCSM.com to explore his platform for training and recruiting world-class customer success managers, or check out ConsultHuckleberry.com to learn how his team helps businesses improve retention and boost post-sale revenue. You can also connect with Alex directly on LinkedIn. Just search Alexander Booth, Huckleberry Consulting. If you enjoyed this episode, I invite you to visit thepaulineshow.com, where you can find bonus content, grab some merch, and stay updated on everything we're building. And of course, you can catch The Pauline Chilton Show on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you love to listen. We create this show to inspire, educate, and empower everyday entrepreneurs, creators, and leaders who are building something meaningful. So if today's conversation sparks something in you, do me a favor, like, subscribe, and share this episode with someone you know who needs to hear it. And if you'd like to support the show, check out our affiliate links for Adobe Creative Cloud and Descript in the show notes. These are the exact tools we use to bring each episode to life. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you next time on The Pauline Chilton Show. We'll see you in the next episode.